there's a lot of people out there that are flippers and wholesalers, right? And it's hard to just cold turkey into building a rental portfolio because the problem is,
Yeah.
the active income, is not as much money when you're starting to own rental properties. Long term, it's significantly more money, but in the immediate
Yeah.
future, it can be less.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of A-List Conversations. Today I got Austin Rutherford, and we're going to be talking about how he has been able to get to $25 million in real estate owned, not syndicated. This is personally owned by him and several hundred plus rentals. Austin, how you doing today?
I'm fantastic, brother. I'm looking forward to this, man.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you coming on. A lot of people that we interview are a little bit older. I think you're in your 30s, right?
30.
So how 30? So how'd you get started so early and on the right path to real estate wealth creation?
Yeah, man. My original dream, way back was to go to the NBA, be a ball player.
Uh-huh.
That didn't quite work out. So fell out of love with basketball and heard about this, thing called passive residual income. And I was like, man, if I could make money continuously without working, like sounded pretty good to me. And we obviously know that's not, that easy. But
Yeah.
that's what made me fall in love with real estate. So bought a duplex, my first property when I was 20. I was making about $1,000 a month at the time, but
Yeah.
I did it the traditional way. 20% down payment. It's just it's a rental property. And
Yeah.
then I realized I needed to make more money to buy more rental properties. And so then I started
Yeah.
flipping houses, flipping, wholesaling, new construction, flipped a few hundred houses. And then
Wow.
realized I was on the wrong race, right? I was on a hamster wheel. And because
Yeah.
flipping and wholesaling will get you rich, but it won't get you wealthy. Wealth is only through the
Yeah.
ownership of real estate. So about three and a half
Yeah.
years ago, I realized that. And then I went all in
Hmm.
on building the portfolio, and that's how we got to where we are today.
That's amazing. So you just recently started focusing on acquisitions to actually own all these properties. Um, and what 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 have you found from the process of flipping and wholesaling to actually owning? How is that different?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are flippers and wholesalers, right? And it's hard to just cold turkey into building a rental portfolio because the problem is,
Yeah.
the active income, is not as much money when you're starting to own rental properties. Long term, it's significantly more money, but in the immediate
Yeah.
future, it can be less. So, one thing that I did when I made that pivot, and I got a phone call. There's a whole story of how I came to this realization. We can dive into if you want. But when I made
Yeah.
that pivot, the thing that I decided to do is I figured out my monthly expenses. So my payroll, my
Yeah.
marketing, my commission, my rent, my payroll, like me, because I gotta live. I'm an
Hmm.
employee of the company just like everybody else. So I figured out
Yeah.
what my monthly expenses were, call it 50 grand a month. And then I
Yeah.
added, $20,000 a month because obviously we want to be a profitable company. So I was like, all right,
Yeah.
cool. I need to go make 70 grand flipping and wholesaling, whether that's one, two, three, four deals a month, whatever it is. And then every deal
Yeah.
past that, then I'm going to keep it as a rental property. So that's how I first
Uh,
made that pivot and was able to do that. Now, I have a portfolio, I have other income. Now everything we do is rentals. But that initial transition
yeah.
was the hardest because you lose a little bit of revenue on the transition. And that's how we were able to
Yeah.
get past that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what was the epiphany that you got that was able to go to flipping to totally, switching into a little bit of actually owning?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. I have a very good friend of mine. His name's Terry, and we both started real estate essentially at the same time. We were in real estate school together. We thought that's how
Yeah.
you were supposed to do real estate, which obviously you don't need your license to be a real estate investor. But we were in school together, and when we started
Yeah.
out, he started buying rental properties, and I started out flipping houses. So like my model was
Yeah.
90-95% flips and wholesales, and then keep 5 or 10%, so a couple. His model was
Yeah.
90 to 95% rentals and then flip 5 or 10%. So they were complete opposites of one another. And early
Yeah.
on in our, like we talk all the time. He was actually in my wedding, very good friend. And we
Yeah.
talk all the time. And early on, I was balling, I was taking vacations, I was, living large, having a good life. He's like, man, like I'm always broke. Like this is BS. Like I hate it. How you always got so much money? I'm like, I'm just flipping
Yeah.
houses and making money. 5 years
Yeah.
later, we had just, a touch base call. And he was like, yeah, man, I just refinanced 30 of my 100 plus houses. I was like, oh, that's what's
Oh
up.
wow.
Like, tell me about it. What does that look like? He's like, yeah, I on the refi, I paid off 10. So 10 of them are free and clear. So that created ten to
Yeah.
$15,000 a month of passive residual income for the rest of his life. He said I
Yeah.
re-leveraged the other 20, which probably created, $3,000 to $5,000 a month of passive residual income for the rest of his life. So he created
Yeah.
$15,000 to $20,000 a month where he never has to do anything again for the rest of his life in one transaction. But that's not what got me. He said on top of
Yeah.
that, I pulled out $1 million tax free on the refi. I was like,
Oh.
huh? Come again? And he ran it back.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference here. Refi proceeds are non-taxable. So $1 million on a refi is like making $1.5 million in real life because you're going to pay roughly a third of it in taxes. To that time in my
Yeah.
career, I never did $1.5 million in a year. He did it in a single transaction. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm playing the wrong game. So legit, that night I went home. I'm like, how do we make this pivot? And I came up with that strategy that we talked about. And the next day I
Yeah.
went into the office. I was like, guys, the whole model just changed. Here's what we're doing now. And that was my like aha moment. Like I realized, I was playing the wrong game. I wholesaled him houses and made like 10, 15 grand. He bought them for, $60,000. Those houses are worth
Yeah.
over $200,000 now. So I was running the wrong race.
Wow. Well, that's amazing that you found out. I mean, it's great. And
Yes,
and
blessing.
flipping houses and wholesaling. Um, Now that you're doing Burr, right? You're doing the buy, renovate, rehab, refinance.
Yep.
Um, what does that look like? Like, do you make different criteria for that?
Yeah. So right now, my I'm trying to build a rental portfolio. So every deal that comes in, first I'm running it as a rental property, and then if it doesn't fit the rental standards, then if it's still a profitable flip, then we'll flip it. Right? I'm not just going to pass on
Mm-hmm.
money. So then we'll flip it
Yeah.
if we have to. But the goal, there's two numbers that we look for when a deal comes in. And it's the strategy that you said. We're buying it with other people's money, renovating it with other people's money, renting it out to a tenant, and then taking it to a bank to refinance to pay off our private money lenders. I've been able to raise $20 to $25 million in my real estate career to fund all my transactions. I've used hard money like 3 times in my entire life. Everything else has been
Yeah.
100% privately funded by private money lenders. So
Yeah.
the two numbers that we look for is we want to be into the deal, all in, purchase, rehab, holding cost, interest, closing costs, appraisal fees, everything at less than 75% of the value because we know a bank will give us 75% on the refi. So if I can be in
Yeah.
it to a deal for less than 75%, I got a book. It's called Get Free Houses. I own this property without a single penny of my own money. So that's the first thing that we look for. We want to be as close to zero as possible. I've got a 10-unit apartment building right now where I'm going to have to keep
Mhm.
roughly $20,000 of my money into the deal. So am I willing to
Yeah.
buy, 10 units for $2,000 a unit? I think everybody would say yes to that. So the
Yeah,
goal is
for
to get as
sure.
close to zero as possible. And then the other side to it is that it has to cash flow. So we look at it on a DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. We want it to
Yeah.
be at least a 1.2 or greater because we never want negative cash flow. There's some people that say like, hey, buy it,
Yeah.
but 5 years from now it'll be cash flow positive. We might not make it till 5 years from now. The only reason somebody goes
Yeah.
bankrupt is from lack of cash flow. So we always want it to cash flow. We look for a 1.2 DSCR or greater, or we want to be all in for as close to $0, 75% as possible. Those are the two numbers. If it hits that, we're keeping it 100%. If not, if it's still profitable, then we'll flip it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to touch base a little bit on the 75% all in. Um,
Yep.
how do you find these deals so that you're getting them 75 cents on the dollar all in?
Yeah. So how I do it now and previously are slightly different. So I'll break them both down to you.
Yeah.
Previously, I used to have a wholesale business, right? Wholesaling to me is just marketing. That's all it is. So we had a
Yeah.
marketing business where we spent $20,000, $30,000 a month in marketing. And then we
Yeah.
had cold callers, we had junior acquisitions, we had closers, we had sales teams, and we would bring deals in. We're doing 5, 10 deals a month, and we were direct to seller buying these deals. So I did that for
Yeah.
many, many years. It was great. Recently over the last couple years, I've built a brand on social media and I'm a little bit more known in different networks. So now we
Yeah.
buy all of our deals from wholesalers. So we'll do extremely targeted, like driving for dollars, like very niche properties. And
Yeah.
then besides that, then we're just buying deals from wholesalers. So the majority of our portfolio has came from other people, wholesalers, at this point.
Oh, that's amazing. So it's actually inbound now that you're getting the leads and no more marketing. So you're just
Correct.
making
Yeah.
content. I bet you
Yes.
that saves you a lot of money.
Big time. Big time.
That's awesome. And now that you have this the 75% all in, and you want to get a DSCR, to get your cash out of the deal, um,
Mhm.
what does it look like from your private money lender? Like how much are they charging you? And then also, when the DSCR comes in, you know, I guess the answer is 1.2, right? But how do you pay off your private money lender? Like, you know,
Yeah. So our model is a little bit different than quote unquote what's normal, and that's the beautiful
mhm,
thing about private money. When you're borrowing money from banks or hard money institutions or equity partners, it's a very different way people borrow money versus borrowing money from private money lenders, which is what I've been able to do. So when we
yeah,
borrow from a private, we'll just use very round numbers. Let's say we're buying a house for 100 grand, and then we're putting $50,000 into it, right? So we're going to go
yeah,
and borrow $150,000 from a private money lender, and then they're going to fund
yeah,
the entire transaction. So when I buy this property, they're funding 150,000. The $100,000 gets paid to the seller, and then I
yeah,
get 50 grand to fund the rehab in my bank account the day of the purchase, which is very different than
yeah,
hard money. Typically, you have to draw it out over the life of the project. But we get
yeah,
100% funded day one in my pocket in my bank account. So then we go out, we renovate it, we stabilize it, we take it to a bank to refi it. And during that time, I make zero monthly interest payments. There's no monthly interest payments paid. They do
yeah,
get a mortgage on the property and a promissory note from both the business and myself personally. So those are the
yeah,
documents that collateralize their investment.
yeah,
And then on the back end, when we go to the bank to do a refinance, we pay all the principal and the interest at that point. So there's no cash flow issues for me because we don't have to make monthly interest payments. So
yeah,
for simple math, let's say we borrow $150,000 at 10% interest. That's
yeah,
$15,000 a year in interest payments. But let's say this deal only
yeah,
takes us 6 months. So it's prorated, so it's $7,500 in interest. So once we
yeah.
close the refi 6 months later, we'll pay our lender $157,500, and then they'll typically get that money and say, "Hey, I don't want the money. Take the money back," and then we'll go and find another deal and roll that money into the next investment.
Okay, cool. So, if I understood correctly, you get a deal that's cost 100,000, and then you get an extra $50,000 for that rehab.
Yep.
What is the deal worth after you're done with it and you're going to refinance it?
Yeah, so our goal is 75-ish%, but it's our all-in basis, not just our purchase and our rehab. So we bought it 100, rehab 50. Let's say we owe $7,500 in interest, so we're
Yeah,
175, 157.5, and then let's say there's another 5 grand in closing costs, title fees, appraisal fees, etc. So we're all
yeah,
into this deal for $162,500. So that's the
yeah.
number that we want to be all in at the 75%. So if you do that, that means the property would have to appraise for $217,000. So our goal is
Oh,
for the 75% ratio. It doesn't always work like that. There's two
yeah,
sides to this, right? Let's say we're into the deal for 77%. So that
yeah,
means on the refi, I'll have to keep $4,000 of my money into the deal. So the way I look
yeah,
at it is for me to buy a cash flowing asset that's building wealth for myself and my family, and I only got to put 4 grand down, 2% down payment. I'm in.
yeah,
Like I'm in every time.
yeah.
Now, if I'm into this
That's
deal
awesome.
for 95%, I'm not doing that deal because I don't want to have to keep $40,000 of my money in the deal. Like that, I'm out, right? So one
Yeah.
side is you can be in for a little bit more sometimes, but it's usually like 1, 2, 3, 4% as a down payment, which I think a lot of people would do that. But the other side
Yeah.
that's even better than that is, let's say you get a smoking deal and you're in
Yeah.
at 70 cents on the dollar. The bank will
Yeah.
still refi you out 75. So on a $200,000 asset, that extra 5%, which is $10,000, after you pay
Yeah.
everybody off, you get to keep the $10,000. And that's tax free. That doesn't show as income.
Yeah.
So that's like doing a $15,000, wholesale fee, because you got to pay 5 grand in taxes, a third. So your $10,000 in profit on a refi is essentially the same thing. So, and the thing that a lot of people I think misunderstand here, that deal that we just broke down, let's say you're buying
Yeah.
it for 100 grand and it only needs $30,000 of rehab. So you're into it
Yeah.
and it's worth 200 grand on the back end. So essentially
Yeah.
you're into it for 65 cents on the dollar, right? So you
Yeah.
could assign that deal and make 20, 25 grand in an assignment fee, right?
Yeah.
Somebody would probably buy this. Let's use $20,000. So you assign it, you make 20 grand. Again, you have to
Yeah.
pay roughly a third in taxes. So you're only going to make 14 or $15,000 net, like at the end, like in your pocket. But
Yeah.
instead of wholesaling it, why don't you just do the Burr method, which is what I just kind of broke down, and then on the
Yeah.
refi get the $10,000 out? So think about this: you can take 20 grand of profit, which is really 14 after taxes, or you can keep the asset and make 10. So it's 10 to 14 grand. It's a $4,000 difference, but you still own the asset and you get paid every single month for the rest of your life. So I think people have
Yeah.
that disconnect that they're losing out on this $20,000 assignment fee to keep a rental property, but they don't see that they're essentially making the same amount of money already. The only difference is you get to build long-term generational wealth by making one small decision. So I think that's a
Yeah.
lot of people don't understand the power of this strategy and what it could be.
Yeah, that is that's amazing. And usually for you to delay gratification and then potentially get a wholesale fee, I mean equivalent, from the cash refi, and then own the property and get rent from it. I mean, that's amazing. So, what usually in rent do you receive now that you've completely cashed out, refinanced this property?
Yeah, I mean, so every deal is different. We've got some properties where tenants pay us, $900 a month, and we got some properties, commercial properties, where tenants pay us, 6 grand a month. So it varies deal by deal. So it just depends on each asset. The simple math is like the 1% rule. If
Mhm.
we're into it for 170 grand, I ideally it can rent for $1,700 a month. That's not always what happens, but if we're
Yeah.
into it for 170 and it rents for 1,500, that's still a decent. That's a we call it a base hit. It's a base hit. It'll pay for itself, give you a little bit of cash flow, and you'll be able to build wealth long term.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm really glad to be speaking to you about this. And I recently noticed that you actually got into commercial real estate. And I want
Yep.
to know, behind your decision, what was the reason that actually got you into that path now?
Yeah, so commercial is there's a lot of assets in commercial, right? So multifamily, 5+ units is technically commercial, and then there's office and warehouse and industrial and all these others. So all those are commercial assets. So I've been buying smaller multifamily for probably 5, 6 years now, which is technically commercial, but it's still residential. But
Yeah,
the true commercial, which is the warehouse that we bought last year, it's a 16,000 square foot warehouse. Honestly, it came from a guy. He's like, "Hey, I have this deal. I think it's a great deal, and I need help, putting the financing together. I need help raising the money, signing on the debt, etc." So I
yeah,
looked at the deal, and there's a big difference here. I ran the numbers as if it was a typical residential property, which in those scenarios, you collect $10,000 a month in rent, and then we as the owners have to pay the insurance, the taxes, the maintenance, the clogging of the toilets, all that stuff, right? So it's 10
yeah,
grand, but we actually only keep like 7, right? Because we got to pay those expenses.
yeah,
Um, the difference in commercial, so that's how I ran this deal. And again, it was a
Yeah.
base hit. I was like, yeah, this is a decent deal. Like, let's buy it. So we bought it.
Yeah.
And then we did a little bit of work to it. And then it was vacant at the time. Did a little bit of work to
Yeah.
it and then went to go lease it and find a tenant for it. So I was talking to a commercial broker and I was like, hey, here's the asset. We're thinking about $10,000 a month. He was like, yeah, I agree with that. He's like, we just have to add the nets to that. I was like, what does that mean? And he was like, yeah, triple net lease. I was like, what does that mean? And in the commercial space, essentially what happens, the $10,000 a month is base rent, but then
Mhm.
the taxes get added back, the insurance gets added back, the snow plowing, the grass cutting, the utilities, the maintenance, the repairs, the property, all your expenses gets added back. So your $10,000 a month, they might actually pay $13,000 or $14,000 a month once you add back in all those expenses. So and that's the triple net lease. The 10 grand is a net price to you. So it went from like
Yeah.
a base hit to like a triple. And I was like, what? Like, we don't got to go and unclog the toilets. We don't got to go and, replace the light bulbs. We don't even have to go through eviction. In our state, if commercial doesn't pay, you lock them out. You go and you change the locks and you're done. So it's like, what in the world? This is so different. And that's what kind of gave me the itch for the commercial world. And now, we're very actively and heavily looking for more assets like that.
Yeah, that is amazing that you happen to stumble into a deal and it even happened to be a better deal. Um,
Agreed.
what is I guess what's your long term plan when it comes to commercial in terms of pie share and residential as pie share of what you would like to do in the future, maybe to build longer wealth, like bigger wealth.
Yeah, I mean, so we're in that transition phase right now. I always said it's
Mhm.
like, I buy real estate to hold forever. I'm never
Yeah,
going to sell. And you look at it, it's like, all right, cool. Do I sell a few houses? Houses that I have 150, $200,000 equity in. Do I sell one, two, three, four, or five of those, and then go buy a $5 million warehouse? So we're kind of in that transition phase right now. But as of right now, today, we're still actively buying residential and we're actively looking and buying commercial. So, I'd say right now it's probably going to be like, 50-50 or something like that.
okay.
Long term, we'll see how it goes. I don't know 100% yet.
That's amazing. That's great. And so I want to touch in a little bit of the the beginning journey of that you had. I
Mhm.
looked into it, and you made $100,000 in your first flip,
Yeah.
and obviously that is a large amount of money for someone that's in their 20s.
Yep.
And so I wonder, how was it that you were able to find the private money lender? Was it that you were able to do the rehab, and how were you able to make this profit?
Yeah, no. Looking back, it's kind of crazy how it all came together. But essentially, I bought that first duplex. My money, I had it saved. I put it as a down payment, and then I
Yeah,
realized I was like, all right, well, I'm broke, so I got to go make some more money. And I got licensed as a realtor. Sold two houses, made like 8 or 10 grand. Hated it, and was driving. I was valeting cars at the time. I was driving into work, and this radio ad came up. It was like, if you want to learn how to flip houses, come to this seminar. And I was like,
yeah.
yep, I'm in. So I went to the seminar, paid $25,000, maxed out my credit cards to join
Wow.
a coaching program, and
Yeah,
thought I was going to get rich, overnight. That's basically what everybody thinks. And
yeah.
from that day that I joined that program to the day I actually flipped my first house, what was a 16-month journey. So people say like, oh, it's 100K. You own $25 million of real estate today. It took me a year and a half to make a penny. And during that journey, I was valeting cars, working like 50 hours a week. I was going to college, taking 15 credit hours, and I was trying to start my real estate business at the same time. And I wasn't like halfway in on this real estate thing. I was looking at houses and making offers every single day for 16 months. So it was a struggle
Yeah,
and it sucked.
yeah.
But essentially, it took 10 months to buy that first deal. And it was a $74,000 purchase and a $170,000 rehab. So it was $250,000 of money that I didn't
Wow.
have.
Yeah.
So, I started asking everybody I knew, to lend me the money, and they said no. So I called
Yeah.
somebody I met at a RIA, and I was like, "Hey,
Yeah.
man, if I can't raise this money, like, do you want to buy this thing? Can you come look at the house and like tell me I'm not crazy?" And he walked it, and he was like, "Yeah, it's a great deal. If you can't raise the money, I'll pay you an assignment fee." I was like, "Cool." So at least I had an out at this point, right? I had something.
Yeah.
And so then I kept trying to raise money. And long story short, I ended up calling a lady that I met a year prior at another local real estate meetup. And a year before that, I was new. She was new. I was like, "What are your goals?" She's like, "I'm trying to flip houses. I have a self directed IRA, that I'm going to use to buy my own real estate deals." I was like, "Oh, that's awesome. I'm trying to start as well." We exchanged numbers. Life went on.
Yeah.
A year later, I got this first deal under contract, and it clicked. I was like, "Oh, I got to call that lady."
Yeah.
So I called her and explained the deal to her, walked her through it, took her to the house, and she ended up funding that first deal for me. So we bought it, we renovated it. It was a $170,000 construction budget. We put 25 grand into the foundation. We built a 600 square foot addition. We gutted it to the studs, opened up the walls, redid the electric, plumbing, HVAC, roof, window, siding,
Wow.
literally everything top to bottom, and listed it, sold it in 8 hours. And 4 days after my 22nd birthday, I netted $107,000 in profit. So it was a long journey, but it was worth it for sure.
That's worth it for sure. How did you know like all these little things to do? Like you had to gut the electric, you had to redo the foundation. You know, I'm sure there was a huge list, but like being it your first time, how did you get to know that knowledge to be able to do it, or who did you rely on?
Yeah, no, it was a massive learning curve, and I said after that deal, so I went to the house every day just because I wanted to learn, and I was like,
Yeah.
after doing that, I was like, I can take over the world, like I figured this out, I'm good. But
Yeah.
early on, the mentors, the coaches that I hired, they taught how to manage contractors. So it's called, we
Yeah.
call it the five critical documents. So having a scope of work, a draw schedule, an independent contractor agreement, a lien release, a W-9, having the proper documents in place,
Yeah.
saved me on that deal because the contractor tried to walk off the job multiple times. But he was, how do we say this? He was behind in payments. So he had done more work than he was paid for. So he couldn't
Yeah.
walk off the job because he still needed to get paid. And our
Yeah.
draw schedule, saved us. It said, "Hey, once you do demo and framing, you get 25 grand. Once you do electric, plumbing, and HVAC, you get 50 grand. Once you do drywall, window, siding, doors, you get 30 grand." And he had to hit
Yeah.
those milestones to get paid. So I still to this day don't even know how to renovate a house. Like I could probably figure out how to paint a wall, but like if you want me to like
Yeah.
frame a stud or put a door in, like no clue. So I've always relied on the professionals, which are the contractors, to do those things. I just have my paperwork in order to make sure that I don't get screwed over, during the renovation process.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's very important to have these five things when you're managing a contractor. And if you have these five things, then it's much easier for you to get the job done and secure that the job act gets done.
For sure. I mean, so like I had a buddy, he got halfway through a project. It was a big project. It was, I think it was like $500,000. And he got halfway through the project, and then he had to have a conversation. Well, I guess his general contractor had a conversation with him, and he was like, "Hey, by the way, like, the money's short." He was like, "No, like we're paying it out per the draw schedule." He was like, "Yeah, that's labor only. That doesn't include material." And in his contract, it did not say labor and material. My buddy assumed it was labor and material. So he went from a $500,000 budget to like a $750,000 budget essentially overnight because material is very
Wow.
expensive. So making
Yeah.
sure that you have your ducks in a row that says, "Hey, labor and material, and what material?" Don't just say labor and material and you want a $10,000 appliance package put in, and they put in, some apartment complex $800 appliance package. So in our scope of
Yeah.
work, it's very detailed on what needs done, and it has the SKU numbers. So it says, "Hey, this is the material. Here's the SKU number." So there is no
Yeah.
argument as to what materials put into the property because it's already laid out. It's exact. The exact number from the store, so you know what to put into the property. So, yeah, extremely important to make sure your ducks are in a row and everybody's on the same page.
That's amazing. I'm glad that you went through that and you learned from it. Um, what have you been able to?
One other
Uh-huh.
thing with that, I was actually on a call with a young kid 2 days ago, 3 days ago, hungry to get
Yeah.
into real estate. And one
Yeah.
of his comments was that, he's like, this summer, for summer out of college, like whatever summer before the next year of college, whatever that's called, summer
Yeah.
break. And
Yeah.
he was like, I'm going to get a job with a contractor. So, I can, learn the ropes of contracting. And I was like,
Yeah.
can I be blunt with you? He was like, yeah, that's why we're on the phone. I was like, cool. I was like, honestly, I think that is the biggest waste of time you will ever do in your entire life. He was like, why? Contracting is part of this business. Like, I need to understand construction. I was like, and I
Yeah.
told him my story. I was like, I don't even know how to do it. I know how to get it done. Like, I know what it should look like. I know the end goal,
Yeah.
but I can't do it. Right? I don't know how to do it. You need to
Yeah.
spend your time making money, which in this business is finding deals and raising capital. That's how you get paid in this business of real estate. You don't get
Yeah.
paid for knowing how to swing a hammer. That's extremely hard work in respect to everybody who does it, but you don't get paid for that. You don't get paid real money for that. You get paid money for putting deals together. So don't do that. This summer break, do deals. I promise you, you'll make significantly more money.
That's amazing. I think you just saved him a whole 2 3 months of his life where he's not going to get a lot
Agreed.
of return from it. So,
Definitely agree.
touching on this subject, you have coaching, and obviously you were coaching this young guy here. Um,
Mhm.
what kind of results have you been able to help someone in your coaching program get that we can talk
Yeah,
about?
no, great question. 100%. At the end of the day, people get out what they put into it, right? When I hired
Hmm.
my coach, 16-month journey being broke. I could have said, this doesn't work. This is crap. It's terrible. It sucks. But I stayed true to the journey, right? The beautiful thing about real estate is not if it works, it's when it works. If you take consistent action, the right consistent action day after day after day after day, it will work. I absolutely 100% guarantee you that. The problem is people give up too soon. I always have this like
Yeah,
vision in my head. It's like, it's the meme where like two people are like, dig into like diamonds, and like one
yeah,
person's like one swing away but he's walking back, and the next person
yeah,
is just still going. You're going to hit the diamonds eventually.
yeah,
So I just say that to help motivate people that are saying, hey, I've tried this for a month. Keep going. I promise you it works. But some
yeah,
results, I've helped people build 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 unit portfolios. I've helped people make their first six figures in a day. I've helped people make their first seven figures in a year, multi seven figures. Again, that's the beautiful thing about real estate. Like it works. You literally just have to
yeah,
copy. That's why I'm a believer in coaching. Like I'm a student, right? I
yeah,
spend $50,000 to $100,000 every single year, even to this day, 9 years later, after doing this business, because I want to learn from people that are in a better position than me. You know, like what better way to learn something than literally to copy and
yeah,
paste? Like, yeah, put your spin to it. The sales process isn't the same for everybody because we all have different personalities. But like, put your
yeah,
put your flavor to it, right? Laugh a little bit, be serious, whatever it is for you. Put your spin to it, but it's a copy and paste game. Like everything you want to do in real estate has been done before. Learn from somebody who's done it, and your life's going to be a lot easier.
yeah, yeah. That's amazing. That's true. Um, on the topic of private money lending, you also had to get a private money lender. Um, you know, After that, does it get easier once you've done a project and can had success?
Yeah. Yes, it's easier, right? That's a big question. It's like, well, no one's going to lend you money if you've never done a deal before. Unfortunately, that's false. That's your own negative beliefs in your own head. Is
Yeah,
it easier if you have experience? Yeah, everything's easier when you have experience. But the if I can say one thing about private money where most people mess up and where I messed up early on, people think that raising money, borrowing money from somebody is asking them to do them a favor. is asking
Yeah.
them to believe in them, is asking
Yeah.
them to believe in the vision, right? People like when you're in negotiations, someone's up here and someone's down here. The person that's down here does not usually have success. And if you're asking someone to believe in you, you're down here, right? Private money
Yeah.
lenders, like, oh, I'm money bags. Like, it's a hard negotiation. You need to completely invert that. And I know it sounds crazy when you first hear this, but I genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that I'm giving a private money lender an opportunity of a lifetime to invest with me. And when that
Yeah.
conversation changes, you just flipped it. Now the private money lenders down, you're not asking them, you're giving them an opportunity of a lifetime. And I say that, and it's easy to say that, right? It's like, oh, well, that sounds good, Austin, but like how?
Yeah.
And the reason I believe it like so strongly, I've gotten phone calls from people crying, thanking me for allowing them to retire sooner, or to have a better retirement, or to go on a vacation that they never thought they could have afforded. And the reason they do that, if you can envision this, if you're on like a chart, most people's plan for retirement, if this is money and this is years, most people's plan for retirement is to start working and slowly work their way up, till they're 65 and save, say, $1 million and retire, quote unquote, and then spend that money until they die at 85 or 90 or whatever number it is, in
Yeah.
hope that they have enough money until they die. Because if they run out, they got to go back to Walmart or McDonald's or Burger King to work. That's 99% of the world's retirement plan. So let's
Yeah.
repeat this same thing with you coming in, right? That same thing. They work till they're 65, they save $1 million. Instead of what they're planning on, which is hoping they have enough money until they die, and by the way, giving their kids nothing because they spent it all, this is
Yeah.
the opportunity that you can give them. You can say, hey, instead of doing that, why don't you invest with me? Give me the $1 million. I'll pay you $100,000 a year, which, by the way, is more money that they could spend hoping they don't run out of money. Right? Probably they're
Yeah.
probably only getting 60 grand a year, so you're paying them more money than what they could have received, and if they live till they're 85, 90, 95, 100, you're paying them 100 grand every single year for however long they live for, and when they die, they get to give their kids $1 million inheritance. So when you change your thought process to that,
Yeah.
I believe I'm doing every single person in my life a disservice by not telling them about that opportunity. And once you think like that, raising money becomes easy. It's the easiest conversation you'll ever have because you're giving people an opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a total mindset shift from what most people are taught, you know?
For
Um,
sure.
and that's incredible. When it comes to what you now look at, as a legacy, like what is it that you want to, like, what's your legacy, or like, what do you want to build?
Great question. So I got married a year ago. We have our first child on the way. It's a baby
Yeah.
boy. So everything I've kind of thought about has changed.
Yeah.
I used to be the guy that took pride in outworking people, working longer hours than people. And
Yeah.
there's a time and a place for that, right? There's a hustle season to get to where you want to go. But
Yeah.
like at some point, you got to understand like there's other things in life. Family to me is the most valuable thing in the world. So I'm thinking
Yeah.
differently. I'm still very driven, but I also want to do it in the right manner to have time for my family. So what do I want to leave? I want to leave, making sure my kids know that I was a present father, that I was there. My wife, I was a faithful man. I was present. I was there. I was happy. I was energetic. Those are the big things, I want to be remembered for. And you know, past that, business wise, I have this number in my head. It's 100 million. Goals to get there in the next 2 years, portfolio value.
Yeah.
And I'm sure once I hit that, the number will grow. But
Yeah.
those are the things on the top of my mind right now.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. And I want to touch on, being a young man and being successful. And for most people watching this podcast, they aspire to be, successful. Um,
Mhm.
what when it came to like your partner, like, getting your partner, what was it that you had to come to an agreement, or you had to find in order to get the right type of partner that you wanted to?
That's a phenomenal question. It's what a lot of
Yeah.
conversations that I hear with not single people. It's hard, right? When you start having some money, finding the right person is difficult. I
Yeah.
met my wife 7 years ago. So it was
Yeah.
before I had like real money, quote unquote. So, thankfully I didn't have to go through that as much as, some other people that, maybe in my position today that are still single.
Yeah.
But the one big thing that I did, I was dating around and, just wasn't, finding exactly what I wanted. And it's
Yeah.
kind of funny, people have this vision for their life, right? They write down their goals, how much money they're going to make, what their monthly revenue, all this stuff that they want to have professionally. And I did the same thing. And I woke up one
Yeah.
day and I was like, why do I keep attracting, things that, I don't necessarily want, right? There were some things, from different people, but like the whole package, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, why does this keep happening? So I treated it like a business. I sat down and I wrote out every single trait that I wanted in a female. Everyone. It was close to 200
Yeah.
traits. And some
Wow.
people say that I'm delusional for having that many, but like
Yeah.
I wrote everything down. Like
Yeah.
what do I want her to say to me? How do I want to treat her? What about her friends? What about her family? What about vacation? What about traveling? What about what we want? How many kids we want? What about this? Like I thought about everything and wrote all
Yeah.
of it down. It was close to 200 traits. And ironically, 6 months later, I met my wife. So it's like, it's crazy how like
Oh
people
man.
think through that and they never take the time to actually sit down and think through what they want. So, that's one recommendation, take the time and write the list because once you are very clear on what you want, you seek that. Your subconscious mind tends to find that in the real world. So that's one thing. And then once you have someone, one thing that my wife and I do today,
Yeah.
every Sunday, we have a meeting. Again, we have meetings in business and sales teams and operations and
Yeah.
sellers and buy. Like we have all these meetings, right? But we never work on our relationship, on your marriage, or if you're not married, your fiance or boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever it is. But you never work on that. It's the craziest thing ever.
Yeah.
So we meet every Sunday and talk about the week. We're like, hey, how'd the week go? What did we like and what did we not like? What did you do that irritated me and what did I do that irritated you, and what's the solution to that? If you do this next week, what can I say so then you don't continue to do that? And what are our plans for the next week and what's date night for the next week? So we meet every week on our relationship. That's something
Yeah.
that's, I believe that's helped us. We've been together about 5 years now. So I think that's helped get us to where we are. So those are a couple thoughts on that.
That is great. Yeah. It's great to have people like you because you guys can show us the way of how to be better in relationships and business. So that's awesome.
We're
Um,
still working on
yeah.
it.
When it comes to content, you obviously made the switch a couple years ago to start making content. I want to know what was your thought process, what you saw about the big new opportunity, and what it is now that you've been in it for a while.
Yeah. When I first, one of my mentors, again, power of having coaches and mentors, right? One of
Hmm.
my mentors continued to say, hey, social media, social media, social media. So, and I ignored it for the first 2 years. And
Yeah.
one day I was like, all right, I'm going to try this social media thing. I did a Facebook Live. That was like my first, like, go ahead at social media. And
Yeah.
I took a journal and I wrote down, everything that I, wanted to talk about. Because my fear, people's biggest fear is looking stupid. What is somebody else
Hmm.
going to think about me? So I wrote down, bullet pointed my talk. So if I like lost
Yeah.
track, I could look at it and get right back, and I'd be good. Nobody could talk, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I wrote it down. I was like, all right, I'm good. So I set my phone on my water bottle in front of me. I was in San Diego with one of my boys on a vacation, and I set my phone there, and then you go to live, and then you have to click start. So I clicked
Yeah.
live, and then I sat and looked at my phone for like 30, 40 minutes straight without clicking start. And it's
Yeah.
all the fear set in. It was like, oh, what if somebody says something? What if nobody shows up? What if I screw up? What if I stutter on my words? What if I'm an idiot, right? All the negative
Yeah.
thoughts. And I sat there, and my friend came out. He's like, you good, bro? Like, you're just kind of sitting there. I was like, I'm good. I'm good. Don't worry about me. And finally ended up clicking start and started talking. And like a minute into me talking, on the top right, it shows you how many people are live watching you. And I
Yeah.
looked up and it was zero. And I was like, oh, crap. I'm right. I am a failure. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to listen to me. So I pick up
Yeah.
my phone and you click X, and then you got to click confirm to cancel it. And I clicked
Yeah.
X, and then I looked at my phone and I was like, am I really going to cop out like off of this? Like, is this really what's going to hold me back? And I
Yeah.
put my phone down. I finished the live. It was terrible. And that was like the first mental barrier I had to get by in social media. And I think that's what everybody struggles with early on is that the fear of the
Yeah.
unknown. What are people going to say? What are people going to think?
Yeah.
Luckily, I got past it, kept posting, ended up getting a deal. Somebody sent me a deal. And I was like, wait a minute, I can make money on this? This is crazy. And started
Yeah.
taking it more serious. And then I raised some money and did more deals off of social media. I was like, oh yeah, like this is the wave. This is it. And
Yeah.
that's when I like really started taking it serious. And just been making content, ever since. I've got multiple businesses off of social media. I've made a lot of money off of social media.
Yeah.
Majority of my deal flow comes from social media. I raised a ton of private money, affiliate offers. I can give you so many examples. The power of social media. In today's world, the new
Yeah.
currency is eyeballs. If you have a
Mm-hmm.
million more people that know who you are, want to do business with you, I promise you, you're going to make more money. So, we say eyeballs is currency. So we're still trying to, run it up and get in front of as many people as possible on the social media side.
Yeah. Yeah. That is great. Um, wow. Yeah. That's incredible. I want to touch in a little bit on the tenants that you have. So a big part of
Mm-hmm.
obviously, this whole process is that you put a tenant in there, and that tenant
Yep.
pays then the mortgage and leaves you some cash flow, right?
Correct.
If there is any. So how is it that you get to get the best people in your rentals that take care of the place and that pay you, and it's not a headache? You didn't just you know get yourself a headache basically.
100%. There's two things that I think really make a difference. Number one, we harden our properties. So when we buy it and renovate it, we harden it. And what that means is we put in materials that are less likely to get damaged. So we don't do
Yeah.
any carpet, everything's hardwood. We don't do
Hmm.
Formica countertops, everything's granite. We don't do
Yeah.
those super thin, surrounds in the shower because they fall off or get damaged or holes get punched in them. We put in the
Yeah.
thick surrounds, so there's not as much damage.
Yeah.
We typically replace the roofs, the furnace, the ACs, the windows, so everything's hardened to massively reduce the repairs. Right, vacancies and repairs will destroy a deal. So if
Yeah.
you do those things on the front end, ideally, theoretically, there's less expenses long term. So that's something that I think definitely helps our cash flow long term, is that we
Yeah.
have less turnover cost. So that's number one.
Yeah.
And then number two is the tenant, right? So
Hmm.
once it is done and we list it, you got to vet the tenant, right?
Yeah.
Don't literally put anybody in there. Check their income, verify their income, run a background, a credit check. If they have a 500 credit score and eight, credit cards that are past due, like it's probably not the best person to rent to. I've
Yeah.
always been on the side that it's better to not rent it for a month to a bad tenant and wait for a good tenant, because a bad tenant
Yeah.
can cost you 5, 10, 20, $30,000 between non-payment and damages. So it's better to lose
Yeah.
1,500 than lose 10 grand.
Yeah.
So vetting them on the front end, and then also I think one of my biggest lessons, once they're in there, is the management. And
Yeah.
what I mean is so I have two property management companies that manage my portfolio. I don't manage them personally.
Yeah.
And the reason there's a second one is because we had some issues with the first one. And
Yeah.
not issues. The manager has a big heart, and nobody can
Yeah.
fault him for that, right? That's just the world we
Yeah.
live in. But unfortunately, if you let tenants get in the habit of paying late or making excuses, or it's just going to get worse. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. Nobody
Yeah.
starts to pay late and then gets caught up. It just continuously gets more late.
Yeah.
Nobody, has a burning, willing desire to pay you, right? Everyone's
Yeah.
like, oh, I got family reunion. Oh, my cousin's sick. Oh, my family member passed away. Or, oh, everyone's got an excuse. And if you
Yeah.
listen to it enough, you know, they're going to get used to giving you excuses. So how you
Yeah.
manage it as well, um, massively can help or not help your cash flow. So, just being strict on your lease. If it's due on the first, it's late on the third, and there's $100 late fee, on the fourth, charge the late fee, because they're not going to want
Yeah.
to keep paying the $100 late fee. If you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, it's all good, like forget about the late fee. Guess what? They're going to keep paying you late. So I think just managing it per the lease and try to remove emotion out of it. It's hard to do, But at the end of the day, like we have an obligation and a right to be profitable because we have to pay our team, we have to pay our employees, we have to take care of
Yeah.
our family, and we can't do any of those things if we don't run and operate a profitable business. So you got to manage it with integrity because you have responsibility once you start having team members that you have to pay for.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And one thing that touches into that, what markets are you in, and how did you pick your markets
Yeah,
for
so I
investing?
own everything Columbus, Ohio. Luckily for me, it's a great, affordable, cash flowing market. But
Yeah.
that's where I was from. I was born and raised there. I live in Florida
Yeah.
now. I've been here for about 3 years. But
Yeah.
my business was there before I left, and my business stayed there and continued there after I left. So,
Yeah.
it's just kind of, a blessing to be from there. But, we've looked at other markets, and all the markets have been in the Midwest, like
Yeah.
Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Dayton, places like that, because the price point to the cash flow is still relatively affordable and you can
Yeah.
still cash flow profitably versus places like, South Florida, California,
Yeah.
parts of Arizona, it just doesn't exist there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Um, And are some of your renters is it just straight renters, or do you have some Section 8 renters? Because I know sometimes in the Midwest there's a big, Section 8 you know, arbitrage you can make there.
Yeah, that's like the buzzword nowadays. All over social media is like Section 8, Section 8.
Yeah.
So, yes, we have Section 8 tenants.
Hmm.
Like the confusion, people like think they're buying Section 8 properties. There's no
Yeah.
property that's Section 8. It's a house that you decide to rent to Section 8 tenants.
Yeah.
So we just buy houses that cash flow. And if Section 8 tenants come to lease, then we'll lease it to them.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the minority of our portfolio for sure. And the other big thing is like it depends on the area that you're in, because Section 8 in Columbus, Ohio, is a nightmare. We're waiting for a move-in inspection, and it's been 5 weeks. So the properties we have the tenant, they've already submitted paperwork, property's ready to go, everything's ready for them to move in, except
Yeah.
they have to do a move. The Section 8 has to do a move-in inspection and it's been 5 weeks and they still don't have it scheduled. So we lost money. We have zero income for 5 weeks and it's still not scheduled.
Yeah.
So, that's not a good business. That's not a good way to operate a business. So it depends on the area
Yeah.
that you're in as well, if it actually makes sense and is profitable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. It's great to know from someone that has actually tenants. Um, I wanted to talk about a little bit on the criteria that you now go after, so that perhaps anybody that's listening, if they find a deal, they could shoot it over to you. You guys can make money.
Yeah, no, 100%. Let's break bread. Let's do some deals. 100. If you have any deal close in Columbus, Ohio, or close to Columbus, Ohio, we're buying anything. We're buying singles. We're buying multis. We're buying land. We're buying warehouses. Like we'll legit buy anything. Obviously, we
Yeah,
want it at a discount and a value add opportunity, which means it's highly distressed in some way, shape, or form, under rented,
yeah,
vacant. Some issues going on where we can come in and add value. So anything in Columbus. And then if you have a bigger, $5 million plus deal, warehouse or something, in another market, send it to me. Love to partner on something like that as well.
yeah. That's amazing. Now that you mentioned the commercial property, I don't think we got into the value add. You bought this warehouse. Obviously, it came out to be a better deal. What was the value add there? Like, what was the play?
Yeah, so when we bought it, it was essentially vacant. There was like 20% of the property was leased, but they weren't even paying.
Yeah,
So essentially, it was zero income. So we bought it for 640, excuse me. Bought it for
yeah,
640 grand. Raised money from a private money lender to fund it.
yeah,
It didn't need that much work. Again, the cool thing about commercial is that the tenants do their own improvements as well, for the most part. So it
yeah,
doesn't need that much work. So we'll be all in for like maybe 700 grand. We're almost leased up now. And then we'll take it to a bank to refi, and it'll probably appraise 1.1 ish million dollars. So we'll be in for about seven, and it'll appraise for like 1.1. So we'll be able to pull hopefully, 100, 200 grand out tax free, and still have a cash flow very, very profitably.
Gotcha. So it being appraised at 1.1 means that you guys could potentially get 80%, something like that
So
out.
75. Well, so every bank's a little bit different, but probably the bank we're going to go with is 75%. So they'll
Uh-huh.
give us 825, and we'll be all in
Yeah.
for about 700. So we'll be able to pull. Scratch that. The building came with a house too, and the
Oh,
house is worth 160, 170,000 independently. So that's all on the warehouse, and then
oh
we'll own
wow.
the house free and clear. So it's a great deal
Oh, that's great. Yeah, yeah, that's
for
amazing.
sure.
And this deal was brought to you by one of your students or something. And did he find this deal through a broker, or was it found off market through maybe some outbound or inbound marketing?
Yeah. No, great question. He's not technically a student. He's another investor in the market, but we've known each other for many years. So he actually found it on market. It was technically going through what's the word?
Probate.
Not foreclosure, right before foreclosure, receivership. I was going through
Uh-huh.
receivership, and so he put an offer in, got the offer accepted, and then needed to put the financials together for it, and that's when I got the phone call. So yeah, I mean it was on market, which typically I haven't found on market properties to be that profitable, but this one obviously was. So there's opportunity out there for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing to hear. An on-market deal is profitable. Um, when it comes to now the way that you teach people and to either start wholesaling or doing fix and flip, what's the path to make 10K in the first 30 days or 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 60 days? Like what kind of marketing do you tell people to do and to possibly get a deal that closes and makes some money?
For sure. Yeah, no. So we're right now we're teaching essentially people how to build wealth using other people's money. So it's how to
Hmm.
stack rental properties and build a portfolio. If you're like, "Hey, I absolutely need to make, 10 grand in the next 30, 60 days." That's going to be wholesaling real estate. So doing marketing,
Yeah.
finding a deal and wholesaling it. The when you are trying to do a couple deal or a few deals, going niche with your marketing is always the best. And what I mean by that is like finding the city that you want and then doing targeted marketing through probates, foreclosures, divorces, tax lien, code violations, water shutoffs, evictions. Like all of those have specific reasons somebody may be interested in selling versus just calling a absentee owner, right? When you're trying to scale and do many deals, you have to do bigger marketing because those niche lists just aren't big enough to get the deal flow out of it. But they're
Yeah.
amazing lists to do a few deals. So that's what I always recommend. Start with a niche. I don't know if it's niche or niche, but niche list, and cold call, drive for dollars. Do that marketing because it's the fastest way to get a deal.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. What do you have? What are your parting words? To anybody that's listening that made it to the end of the podcast, what would you tell someone to do right now? Or advice?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you staying here, but the one of the best pieces of advice is again, it's kind of what I said earlier. It's like it's not if, it's when. So don't
Yeah,
don't get down. Don't quit. This business works, right? So stay to it. And then the second piece is anybody that was kind of in my position, which was chasing money. Flip wholesale, flip wholesale, flip wholesale, and try to stack cash.
yeah,
Um, Try to sooner than later make that pivot into the wealth side of this business, which is through the ownership of real estate. I going back, if I would have done it a year or two prior to when I did do it, I would have a lot more money and a lot more properties and a lot more wealth today. So, maybe if you're actively doing deals consistently, start clipping some rental properties and taking those down to keep for yourself.
okay, perfect. Thank you. I think that's a really great advice, and thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate you. Where can we find you? And where can we find your courses? Where can we get more from you?
Yeah, no, if you're interested in coaching, workwithaustin.com, and social media at Austin Rutherford Official. I respond to my DMs, so hit me on there, and then we're on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, all that stuff. But Instagram's the most active channel, so we'd love to connect with anybody on there.
That's amazing. Okay, Austin, thank you so much, and hope you come on another podcast. And for the listeners, please check out Austin and reach out to him if you enjoyed this podcast. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks, brother.